our message is that we need to become aware of the kind of advertising that is encouraging these norms of overconsumption. And we want to see an end to them in the way that we understood that the promotion of tobacco was a fundamental challenge to human health and was leading to people dying. And the kind of advertising which is promoting high carbon products and high carbon lifestyles needs to have the same kind of controls on it that tobacco advertising does, and that this might help us get off the treadmill of consumerism and overconsumption that is driving the climate crisis.
Our problem in the environmental movement is that we're being outspent by the fossil fuel industry by about 38-1. So someone has sort of calculated this. And then the implication of that is we need to increase our spending by 38 times, right, in the environmental movement. No. What we need to do is regulate and have curbs on these companies being able to continue to mislead the public in this way.
My name is Andrew Sims. I helped set up the advertising campaign with Leo. I also run a think tank with the New Weather Institute and am Assistant Director of Scientists for Global Responsibility.
And I'm Leo Murray. I also helped set up the Badvertising campaign, and I'm the Director of Innovation and Engagement and a co-founder at the climate change charity Possible.
So what's the main takeaway hope readers and the public take from Badvertising? What's the core idea behind it?
Well, one of the main ideas is that advertising might seem like a sort of superficial, or advertising might seem like a superficial or almost trivial thing. But that's its secret. It's so ubiquitous, it becomes almost invisible. And yet it's the cultural water in which we swim. And at a time when we're living in the middle of a climate and ecological emergency, we have the whole of science telling us we need radical, comprehensive change and a radical reduction in consumption. But we have the advertising industry telling us exactly the opposite, to carry on consuming as if there's no tomorrow, and in the process maybe guaranteeing that there won't be one. So our message is that we need to become aware of the kind of advertising that is encouraging these norms of overconsumption. And we want to see an end to them in the way that we understood that the promotion of tobacco was a fundamental challenge to human health and was leading to people dying. And the kind of advertising which is promoting high carbon products and high carbon lifestyles needs to have the same kind of controls on it that tobacco advertising does.
How often does your job call you out of bed in the middle of the night? Well, if you were a doctor, it would be often. And generally, there isn't much time to spare.
Coffee, Doctor?
Oh, fine. Have a Camel with your coffee.
Thanks.
You know, this night work's kind of rough, isn't it? That's right. But a Camel's always a pleasure.
Yes, folks, the pleasing mildness of a Camel is just as enjoyable to a doctor as it is to you or me. In a nationwide survey, doctors in all branches of medicine were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" The brand named most was Camel's. Tens of thousands of doctors, general practitioners, surgeons, specialists, doctors in every branch of medicine were included. And according to this nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Try Camels yourself, the cigarette so many doctors enjoy.
And that this might help us get off the treadmill of consumerism and overconsumption that is driving the climate crisis.
Beautiful. Can't add to that.
It mentioned the tobacco industry, and they were famous for sort of misleading or sugarcoating or misrepresenting the data. Do you think the oil industry is doing sort of the same thing today?
Yeah, I mean, there is abundant evidence that is exactly what's happened. It's more the case. I mean, this is now coming to light. So, it's in the public domain. So you come across Exxon New, but also there's a brilliant book called Merchants of Doubt, which runs through forensically exactly how they did this. So their scientists, the oil company scientists, knew and confirmed that the products they were selling, if they carried on selling them, had the potential to make the planet uninhabitable within the space of a human lifetime. They knew that, and what they did with that information was cover it up and then fund think tanks to produce work that contradicted their own findings. And I mean, more than that, they funded university departments, to generate work that undermines their own findings that their product was going to cause ecological collapse. And where we are today, it's a bit more sophisticated because we're living in the age of consequences. You can't, the downpours we've experienced here in the UK over the last few months, climate scientists are already saying we're attributing this to the climate crisis. People are going on holiday to other countries and then find they can't leave their hotel room because it's like 45 degrees outside. So it's no longer possible to pretend there is no problem. So instead what we have is fossil fuel companies essentially presenting themselves as part of the solution. And so whenever you see an advert for a fossil fuel company today, it never has any fossil fuels in it. What it is, it's like wind turbines.
The world needs ways to reduce carbon emissions,
especially for heavy industry. We're working on solutions in our own operations,
like carbon capture
and clean energy from hydrogen.
So who are we?
Believe it or not, ExxonMobil.
But wind turbines are a tiny, tiny fraction of what they're putting their money behind, right? And they're still spending money on exploring for more. Never mind the reserves they already have, that if we burn them, the planet will be a desert. They're looking for more to add to those reserves. So we are in this mad space where some of the most powerful and the richest companies in the world are spending amounts of money that can't possibly, there is this thing in our sector. We have some allies who work inside the advertising sector and are promoting sort of responsible advertising, right? And there is a line that our problem in the environmental movement is that we're being outspent by the fossil fuel industry by about 38-1. So someone has sort of calculated this. And then the implication of that is we need to increase our spending by 38 times, right, in the environmental movement. No. What we need to do is regulate and have curbs on these companies being able to continue to mislead the public in this way.
One of the other areas of misinformation, Leo covers the oil industry, but in terms of working from tobacco industry playbooks, of course, some of the other sectors that are dependent upon the fossil fuel industries, like aviation, like the car industry, are also sectors who have consistently lobbied against climate action, and yet in their advertising will try and create the impression to you that you can fly green, that you can drive green.
We managed to optimize daily operations and flight routes to reduce fuel consumption. That's how we aspire to bring flying and nature into harmony. We make sharks fly. We make bamboo fly. We make waste and oil fly. We make change fly. Lufthansa Group.
When in fact we know that where aviation is concerned, there is no such thing. And especially where the motor industry is concerned, where you see them promoting hybrids, making exaggerated claims about their environmental performance. So there's misinformation coming from multiple corporate sectors, and they're using advertising and other forms of marketing to muddy the waters and to confuse people about the right course of action.
So what should consumers do to be aware of this? Because one of the strategies is even shifting the responsibility to consumers, right? Like with carbon footprint. So how can consumers, A, be aware that they're being misled, and two, sort of hold these companies responsible?
Well, look, be acting as citizens and supporting regulations which actively curb corporations' ability to mislead people would be step one. Right? It shouldn't be consumers' responsibility to work out whether what they're being told is reliable or not. It shouldn't be on ordinary people to have to contend with that.
And we also need the existing regulators to live up to what they claim to do.
Yeah.
We have in the UK, for example, an advertising regulator. Written into its codes is that advertising should not promote anything which is grossly prejudicial to the environment. Well, marketing sports utility vehicles that are large and heavily polluting, marketing non-essential long-haul flights. These are all things which are grossly prejudicial to our future survival chances. Anyway, so the regulators need to toughen up. They need to live up to the codes that they've already got, but they also need to be much more comprehensive in their powers so that they can regulate a lot of areas around social media, for example, which escape any form of effective regulation. So we need regulation at the national and international level. We're starting to see some progress where increasingly quite large big cities are who've made promises, action pledges about doing the right thing on climate change. They've signed climate emergency declarations, and they now realize on advertising that they control, but maybe there's big billboards on, bus stops and things like that, that they can pass motions to stop high carbon advertising. And that's starting to happen. We're seeing regions like Stockholm, The Hague, Amsterdam, in this country, in the UK, Sheffield, Basingstoke, Coventry, Norwich, towns signing up to do this. So we want to change the situation in which people are acting, but all individuals can become more aware of the influence and power that advertising has over them, but we need proper and effective regulation too.
If you'd be given a wish list of a couple of regulations that become law tomorrow, what kind of regulations should be most important, you think, specifically?
Well, it's a tobacco-style ban, not just on fossil fuel ads. It's really important to understand. Fossil fuel companies, for a long time, they don't actually market their own products to consumers. They don't need to do that. What fossil fuel companies need is for you to buy a flight, right? That's going to consume more of their product in the space of a few hours than any other activity you can undertake. Or they need you to buy an SUV. And if you buy an SUV, you're going to carry on buying their product every day as long as you own that SUV. So fossil fuel companies don't actually advertise their products to consumers. It's the other stuff, the high carbon products and services that generate the demand for the product. So tobacco style ad ban, which just recognizes that these are harmful products, which the consumption of them runs counter to a whole load of public policy goals and social goods that we are in theory all signed up to, and that allowing them to continue to be marketed to people undermines those goals. So, what does that look like as legislation? Well, we literally have a model because we've done it for tobacco.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a model which has been pushed at the European level as well, which is modelled on the regulations that have been passed by the EU. So it just takes the requirement to act, because once you take a step back and you realise that all the difficult things that there are to do to tackle the climate problem, like re-engineering transport infrastructure, renovating homes and buildings, changing our energy generation structure, that one of the easiest things you can do is to just stop promoting our own self-destruction through the advertising of high carbon goods and services. We think for policymakers, it's a no-brainer. It's low-hanging fruit. It's an easy thing to do.
Doesn't take away anyone's choice, right? People can still go and buy an SUV. If they actually need an SUV, they can go and buy one. But they're not going to be being marketed them in if they don't need them, right? So
you see politicians talking about this. We don't see so many of them actively pushing for this type of legislation, right?
Well, no, that is true. Certainly in this country, it's been pretty. We've not done a huge amount here yet, but I mean, Andrew can reel off examples.
Well, I mean, where we have seen action at the local level, it's usually been councillors who've been elected at a local level who've had more of a voice in their city council or their town council. So we've seen a lot of grassroots action. We've just been in a situation in the United Kingdom where we've had a government that was not really interested in climate action, in fact doing things exactly the opposite, recommitting to highly polluting activities. So we've seen city level action, town level action, regional level action, European action. We've seen action in the southern hemisphere, and even in the United States there are a number of states that have big restrictions on public outdoor advertising. So we know we can make moves in that direction. We've had calls for this kind of action from the World Health Organization, from people in the United Nations. So there is an increasing awareness that there's a logic to taking this step. But we're trying to build momentum to see this kind of action happen on a larger scale.
ultimately it takes like a critical mass of popularity before policymakers start actively looking.
I think that's true up to a point, but it also takes civic courage by individual politicians. We've seen motions and policies get passed at the city level where you've had somebody elected who's understood the issue. They've read our material sometimes and got back and said, yeah, of course we should do this, and carried it through. So I think civic courage by our leaders is also part of the thing, but we've got to put the issue into the conversation so people are aware of it first.
Yeah, I mean, you can't rely on a big premise of what we've been doing over the last few years is literally trying to just surface this as an issue so that you can see it, because it's there, that it's very present, but it's not front of mind, because that's the whole point about it. So how it works is it persuades you to act in ways that you haven't actually given any conscious thought to, right? And so it's very difficult for people to recognize it, especially compared to all the other problems that the country faces, right? But if you've got politicians who are serious about achieving the goals that they have committed to, and they are engaging with the evidence on what is required to meet those goals, then they just need the courage to actually do this stuff. And as Andrew says, this is, when it comes to consumers and like the wider public, this is low-hanging fruit. This is no regret stuff, right? The public will not miss ads for high carbon products and services. They'll still be able to do those things if they need to, but they will just do less of them because they won't be advertised to. The people that will miss it is the industries that are pushing this stuff. And that's where the barrier, that's where politicians have to be brave, because they're going to be lobbied by high carbon industries not to do it.
But there's no big lobby by the public saying, we want more advertising. If you go into a room and say, put your hands up if you'd like to be exposed to more advertising, not many people are going to put their hands up.
No one ever puts their hands up.
The political appeal of this should be key.